Devastation and destruction from ever since time began has been inflicted time and again by man against fellow man. Yet man wouldn't learn from history. It makes him more violent, producing deadly weaponry with nothing but evil intent. So the war could never be over, peace could never be seen, as long as man in his quest for power keep destroying fellow human beings, fellow human beings. I'm telling you, nobody, oh, nobody. But when you really look at it, nobody wins a war. Because the agony of defeat will linger, nations still hating one another and superpowers. They're looking for more power. As long as violence and aggression still dwell in the hearts of man, brother, the war will go on. It cannot be won. No, the war will go on. It cannot be won. Fallout from war is chaos, plenty agony, plenty pain. Economies left in shambles that may never rise up again. Collapse of the money system, disruption of foreign trade, returning against their leaders for the blunders that they have made. Environmental pollution, radiation taking its course, and the thousands that die in battle. Oh, what a waste of human resource. Of course, I'm still telling you, nobody, oh, nobody. Well, when I really think of it, nobody wins a war. The brutal clash of ideologies, carnage and social anarchy, and life reduced to pitiful dimensions. Look, the falling back of progress and growth for entire generation. Sister, it cannot be won. The war will go on. No, the war will go on. It cannot be won. War is just like a racket. It pays dividends for a few. But what does it profit the masses? I mean laymen like me and you. While the leaders playing their chess games, using the masses as pawns with political propaganda, the massacre still goes on. The soldiers, they never started, but they give their lives easily, while those leaders are in a safe place working out strategies. So you see, I know nobody, oh, nobody. But when I really look at it, nobody wins a war. It has stained the passage of history with the blood of the weak and the mighty. Great cultures vanished completely. Look, war can create and destroy political boundaries as it goes on. Brother, the war will go on. It cannot be won. No, the war will go on. It cannot be won. The war will go on. Peace in the world. The war will go on. We need a spiritual revolution. The war will go on. Lord, put a hand on save my children. The war will go on. Man fighting against man. The war will go on. It cannot be won. The war will go on. In the world, peace in the world, peace in the in the world. I want peace in the world. 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 Peace in the world.
It cannot be won. The war will go on.
I lay down in meditation. I took a journey spiritually. My eyes beheld a vision shone clearly in front of me. Well, in the vision I saw an old man slowly beating a drum, humming a melody that was strange to me. Then he called me and said, Sandra, come. He arose and he showed me a country, beautiful everywhere, a land of endless bounty and the riches beyond compare. There was enough for everybody, for all their material needs. But alas, when the old man showed me my people, they were all overpowered with greed. And the old man beat his drum. The old man beat his drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them of the wrath to come, and if you hear him, bye-bye. Revelation time. This is revelation. This is revelation. I want them of the wrath. You're gonna get on them of the road to come. Leaders were fighting each other. They were tearing the people apart. Friends who used to live happy together, now hatred filling their hearts. Neighbors were cursing neighbors, whole villages in mayhem. I heard they were listening deceitful leaders who were preaching for doctrine to them. Look, compassion went out of the window. Deviousness reigned instead. Morality was low, 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 cause the people were spiritually dead. But the old man beat his drum. The old man beat his drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them of the wrath. And if you hear, warn them of the wrath. You're gonna get revelation. Yo, what he tell me? He said, go tell it on the mountain, over the hills, and everywhere. Oh, tell it on the mountain. The old man beat his drum. The youths were all in a quandary, no sense of direction. They lost all hope cause they just can't cope. They're already yet, but they're gone. They have no respect for their elders, no respect for themselves also. Their spirits were all in tatters and reading an all-time low. Then I hear them cussing the system, they're cussing the leaders too. But they were raping, stealing, shooting and looting, cause they all had nothing else to do. The old man beat his drum. The old man beat his drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them on the road to come on and Warn them on the road to come. We gonna get revelation time. This is revelation. This is revelation. Warn them on the road to come. He said, talk to your spiritual leaders. Tell them get on their knees and pray. To get rid of all these karmas that driving good spirits away. Then he tell me, talk to your fellow Calypsonians. Tell them stop the shame and disgrace. Encouraging people to get on bad, jump up and mash up the place. But behold, I saw the sunrise coming over the mountain range. The old man said, that is a symbol of hope if your people get serious and change. But the old man beat the drum. The old man beat the drum. He said, take this melody, girl, go to your country, warn them on the road. And if you warn them on the road to come. You gonna get
And a very good evening to you. The voice and dynamism there of Sandra Devines, singing Sandra, giving us two powerful compositions. The war will go on. The war will go on. And the message from the old man, BT Drum, our greatest gift to the world, our minds. The Calypsonian, the reggae singer, the Shanto singer, able to bring to the fore what some of us struggle to do. The old man BT Drum. Welcome to Politics 101. Tonight we have a special show. WPA Speaks. WPA Speaks. Tonight, we're going to have the Working People's Alliance here to give us their take on the political developments of the day. The political developments of the day. In case you're just joining us, you were looking at the dynamic singing Sandra. Sandra Devines, I think, along with Calypso Rose and singing Francine, the three would be the greatest female Calypsonians to date. And there are so many Calypsonians, female Calypsonians, since the 1970s when Calypso Rose won the Calypso, they used to call it Calypso King. And when she won in 1977, they had to change it to the Calypso Monarch. And since then, women have been on the stage. Political Calypso. Political Calypso. Welcome to Politics 101. You know what to do. Share the link. Share the link. Today is Labor Day. Labor Day, the workers were out. The workers were out. Of course, in Guyana, we had two Labor Day marches, one by the TUC and one by FITOG. Really a reflection of where our society is and where it has been. But today is Workers' Day. Workers' Day. Workers' Day. Karl Marx, way back, said, workers of the world, unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. It was true then in the 1840s, and it is true now. 1848, the Communist Manifesto. Today, communism is a bad word, but back then, it was a powerful slogan. Workers of the world, unite. And today was Workers' Day. I remember back in 1984, the Working People's Alliance helped to organize Workers' Day, and we introduced the slogan, "Today a Workers' Day, not Massa Day. Today a Workers' Day." Happy Labor Day to all the workers of Guyana, our Caribbean, and the world. The trade union movement is not what it used to be, but workers and the plight of workers continue. We have to hold on to the gains that we've made, but we have to look very carefully how those gains are being whittled away. Please share the link and welcome to our Monday evening Politics 101, WPA Groundings. Of course, Groundings is a term that was made popular by the late, indomitable, great Walter Rodney when he was in Jamaica and was going to the street corners and teaching and learning from the poor people, the Rastafarians, the young people in the inner city, what we call the ghettos. Jamaica, they talked about grounding, and he took that term and made it popular. What some considered still, with all due respect to how Europe underdeveloped Africa and the history of the Guyanese working people, some still think that Groundings with My Brothers is Rodney's greatest work. Every time I go to conferences, people ask, why do we don't play Groundings? Groundings with My Brothers and WPA Groundings here with you tonight. My guests are Tacuma Ogunseye, who is no stranger to you all, and Rohit Kanhai, longtime WPA member. And welcome to you, brothers. Good evening, Brother Rohit.
Good evening, Dr. Hines.
Good evening, Brother Tacuma.
It's a pleasure, Dr. Hines. Good evening to your viewers too.
And Brother Rohit, I noticed you were looking and listening intently as those songs. I know you have something philosophical to say, so I'll give you the first bite tonight.
Good evening, my brother Tacuma.
Thank you. Good evening.
I was very moved by the words. They're powerful words, and they capture the moment.
Capture the moment, the timelessness of the work of art that comes from the ground. Brothers, let's start with what is in the news, and that is the local government election. Your party, the Working People's Alliance, from very early said that it was not participating in the elections, and it has been on the road explaining why it would not participate in the elections. We saw nomination day 2 Mondays ago, and ever since then, the PNC/APNU has been unearthing some discrepancies, anomalies. Some call it fraud. Lots of that has been coming out over the last 2 weeks. But I want to start off by asking you all to explain again to our audience why the WPS opted not to participate in the election. I start with you, Brother Tacuma.
Okay. Firstly, I want to remind viewers that when WPS spoke a few months ago, when the joint opposition parties held their second rally, the first one was held at Parade Ground in Georgetown. The second one was held at Golden Grove. I represented the WPA executive, and I had a mandate to present to the meeting the WPA view of the political situation. And I remember we pointed out to 5 or 6 important issues which we believe, you know, is important in the political engagement. And just to quickly mention some of them, if I can't remember all of them: the oil money, GCOM, the state of GCOM, a change in governance system, local government elections and national elections. And we said that when we look at each of them, we cannot separate it. And we can't wage a struggle for one in isolation to the struggle for the others. And we argue that the opposition should take an attitude that we have to put all together and to see it as a whole. Now, I make this point to say that the WPA's approach to the local government elections is not separated from all of those other points of engagement I mentioned. So we treat the local government elections as an integral part of the general struggle, okay, which we feel the opposition and the people need to wage. And to be more specific, as it relates to local government elections, at least after the government called them and fixed a date, we were informed by the information we were receiving from our election representatives in GCOM, our commissioners, Vincent Alexander, Desmond Trotman, and Charles Corbin, who were reporting week after week on the situation in GCOM. And in a nutshell, they had concluded that GCOM now is more partisan than ever for a long time. That after 1992, okay, this is the most partisan commission, and the PPP dominates it from top to bottom. And their judgment is that in that condition, GCOM is unable to deliver fair and free elections. So our attitude, okay, in a big way have been influenced, okay, by their representation to us. So we felt that we were on the correct road, both based upon what is happening in GCOM and based upon our overall understanding of the interplay with all of these things in terms of the overall engagement. And we argue that since the government summons us to local government elections, in a real way, they have choose to heighten the political engagement, and the opposition will have to dispense a lot of money and human capital, okay, to mobilize for the elections. And what we ought to do is to turn June 12th into a day of national resistance and African uprising. And we are convinced as a party that that is the best way to deal with the elections, because at the end of the day, it will put us in a better position to deal with the other issues that I earlier mentioned.
Before I bring in Brother Rohit, let me ask you this. The PNC has opted to at least nominate candidates, and so one could theoretically say that they are going to participate in the election. So here is the PNC participating, and it has explained why it is participating. The WPA and the AFC, the two other opposition parties, they are not participating. How does the WPA deal with this dilemma? What's the WPA position? Are you going to campaign against the PNC? What's your position in this dilemma?
Clearly, we respect the PNC, right, as a political party, to analyze the political situation and to seek to engage it, from where they stand. Now, as part of the opposition, we rather a common position on these important engagements. But we in the WPA have made it very clear that whatever the PNC chooses to do, we want to assure the country and our constituency that that would not lead, okay, to any bad blood between ourselves and the PNC. And in this engagement, the PNC is not the real target. The target is the PPP. Objectively, because we seems to be walking down two different roads. Okay, there is inbuilt in that kind of a relationship contesting positions. But the WPA position for the African Guyanese community, not simply the WPA, the African Guyanese community, which includes its political leadership with WPA's part, okay, its cultural leadership, and its religious leadership, and its sports leadership, should use the 12th to make a statement, a political statement. Now, if the PNC choose to contest the elections, and if they feel that is the best, way to defend the interests, we don't see that preventing them after you finish voting to join in the, other political manifestations of national resistance and African uprising. So for us, we could live okay with their decision, even though we would have preferred to have a common position on the matter.
But Ogunseye, I heard from a WPA member a couple of nights ago that the WPA will do nothing to disunite the opposition or to give comfort to the PPP. Is that an accurate reflection of the WPA's?
Yes, that is an accurate reflection of the WPA's position.
Thank you. Brother Rohit, let me bring you in. Boycotting elections is always a very difficult thing to do. You will remember that in 1980, the PPP and the WPA took different positions on the election. The PPP argued that they should take part in the elections, and ironically, they gave the same argument and justification that the PNC is giving today, and the WPA stayed out of the election. So it's always difficult. The moral question of participating in an election with flawed arrangements, but at the same time, when you don't participate, you cede the electoral ground to the party that won the election. Comment on that.
My first thought is, what do we mean by elections? It's a contest where we are looking for political power. That's the goal of elections. Now, we were engaged between 1989 to 1992 in a tremendous struggle to get what we call free and fair elections. And the very last condition for fair and free elections was a preliminary count at the point of polling. And Mr. Hoyt at the time said that that was a logistical nightmare. He acceded to every condition except that particular one. That preliminary count at the place of polling is what we today refer to as the statement of polls. And every election from 1992 onward has shifted to the accuracy of that statement of polls. Now, the very integrity of the Election Commission is centered around an count of the statement of polls. I don't know if you see the irony in it, that it has shifted now. The battlefield is what happens in GCOM. And what we have seen elections after elections is how do those statements of polls reflect the power struggle. Now, there is a pattern established that elections are becoming warfare with more intensity time after time. The last elections was described to be the mother of all elections. And the reason for that was oil. The oil money was seen as coming in, it was seen as the prize, and we had a very good insight as preparation for the next elections. Now, the local government elections we are faced with is almost a testing ground for the national elections. And we have seen the strategy of the PPP. This began in earnest with the last elections. And it is struggle for control of GCOM. Who has GCOM in their palm has the elections. It's as simple as that. So the battleground is GCOM.
GCOM. Rohit Kanhai of the Working People's Alliance. Ogun, let me come back to you. The PNC has been finding a lot of forgeries on the voters list and the signatories that are supporting those lists. One of the things the 2020 impasse showed us is that elections are not only rigged on election day, they're rigged long before, they're also rigged long before election day. And now we are learning that elections start rigging even before nomination day. Is the WPA surprised at these findings by the PNC?
No, the WPA is not surprised. The WPA at least is heartened that the PNC is being more vigilant now than even the APMU AFC was in 2020. I think in 2020 we took a lot of things for granted because you were in government. You know, you assume certain things would not happen, or you assume that your people will perform in a certain way. And I think it's our clear consensus that the PPP on election day beat us on the ground in terms of rigging. Okay, so it's good to see that in this local government elections, they're behaving as a quote unquote as the way they ought to behave an electoral party, and they're doing the election work unearthing all of these anomalies and all of these attempts to forge fraud, and having the dead, as a candidate, and many dead, as supporting signatures for the party. So we are not surprised because we know that in Guyanese politics, those behaviors are not new behaviors. We live with it, for many years. And we struggled to reduce it as much as we could reduce it. But we knew out of the recount process that it is very much alive, and it played a big role in the final outcome of the 2020 elections. So we are not, as a party, WPA is not surprised. We think it is consistent with our understanding of the PPP line of march, particularly when they're directing it to the African community, because we know objectively, given the racial division in the country and the state of the African community and the state of the whole nation as it relates to local government elections, it is not a very high engaging elections, that it is difficult for even the APMU AFC. Okay, if they decide to contest the local government as APMU AFC, you will struggle to find not necessary candidates, but you will struggle to find the necessary numbers of signatures, you will have to do some good foot work. And if that is true, that would, in our judgment, that will be true for a party that is close to their own constituency. It's going to be a million times true for the PPP. So we knew that while the PPP might be able to put up some candidates who they buy them and pay, to be candidates, or who they forced to be candidates, they would have struggled to get the necessary supporting signatures, because those are, hundreds and thousands of signatures. So we're not surprised, but we're glad at least the PNC is doing the electoral work and is unraveling and exposing this reality.
Brother Rohit?
Dr. Hines, I want you to put on your professorial cap and let us go to a thought experiment. Let us give both political parties what they're asking for. Let us give the cleanest of lists imaginable. Let us give everybody what they're asking for and set the conditions for free and fair elections to the satisfaction of everybody. What will be the end result of the process? Somebody will win the election. What do we have after? Chaos. The problem is not elections. The problem is, when are we going to come to a settlement in terms of who shares Guyana?
And we will come to that a little bit later on, Brother Rohit.
But I'm making a very fundamental point.
Yes, you are. You are.
Give the ideality of every factor and let us all be satisfied. We go into that election. When we come out after the elections, we will be at each other's throat. Has nothing to do with fairness, freeness, the GCOM, nothing. It has to do with, when are we going to accept the Guyana is for all of us.
Guyana is for all of us. Brothers, one of the hits the WPA has been taking over the last couple of years is that it has now become an African party. Many people are accusing members, the PPP has been accusing members of the WPA as being racist and as departing from Walter Rodney. They have extracted Walter Rodney from the rest of us and made Walter Rodney the saint. I want to play something, and then on the other side, get your comments on it.
Of oppression is constantly shifted down onto the shoulders of the working people. Guyana is known internationally as a place in which racial strife has taken place. Community violence reached a particular pitch. One of the few third world countries that we associate with racial violence between two non-white peoples. And of course, the government in power claims that since they came to power, since the PNC came to power, racialism has more or less been dismissed in Guyana. The problem has been resolved. The Working People's Alliance challenges that position. We say that far from being resolved, racism has simply been manipulated by the party in power, and that it is absolutely essential for the well-being of the nation as a symbolic entity, and more particularly for the well-being of the working people as real living beings, that we should address ourselves to the problem of race, and that we should transcend rather than ignore the problem of race. The regime simply goes around papering over cracks, posturing, presenting public positions which claim that there is no racial oppression, that there is no racial discrimination, that there is no sense of racism in the way in which they operate the economy. But in actual fact, they play upon the fears of the Afro-Guyanese masses, they exacerbate the fears of the Indo-Guyanese masses, and in everyday affairs, the manipulation of the courts, the question of granting employment, the structure of the national service, the employment in public services and in all of the armed services. In all of these areas of the national life, there are day-to-day incidents where people of one race or another have cause to feel fear. The Working People's Alliance sees it as one of the principal tasks of our generation, perhaps the most overriding task, to break the division in the ranks of the working class, to overcome that division, to create a unity based on struggle, not a hypothetical unity, not a theoretical unity, but a unity based on struggle, a unity arising out of the fact that workers who are African in origin or Indian in origin, at their place of work, in their places of residence, will struggle for their own material and cultural rewards, and in so doing, come to a sense of the necessary unity required to achieve their objectives.
There's one simple hearing hack anyone can use to improve their hearing almost overnight. Did you know that hearing...
Brothers, you heard Dr. Walter Rodney there. Was he speaking in 1977 or 2023? Brother Ogunseye.
when I listen to it, I'm saying it will be the same speech Walter will make today, because the conditions are almost identical. That's the irony of it. But I want to
go ahead.
I want to just quickly point out that he made very clear that the unity of the working people will have to be not a theoretical matter, but a matter that comes out of the struggle of each side, trying to satisfy the cultural, political, and material conditions, and out of the lessons of that struggle, they build multiracial unity. And to answer the question you posed earlier about the condition of the WPA, is that we are victims of where the African and Indian working people stands post-92. And post-92, in objective terms, saw the African and Indian working people resorting back, to the old behaviors and supporting the old political parties. And from 92 to now, they have fundamentally voted the same way. And in a real way, they have destroyed, the multiracial consistency that Walter and ourselves try to build, in the period of his activism. And it posed new challenges for us to try to achieve the same goals that we were trying to achieve to unite the working people across race. We're forced now to try to achieve that in the objective conditions of the working people, with their allegiance and alliance to the old historical parties. And that is the challenge which we in the WPA have been grappling with. And I will argue so far we have been quite successful. And this in a big way will explain, the state of the party as it relates to the perception that we are African party now as against when Walter was active. The conditions are different. The challenges are different. In Walter days, we were defending Indian interests because we had an African government and Indians felt oppressed. Today, we have an Indian government and Africans is feeling oppressed, and we have to defend the interests. So for us in the WPA, we believe our behavior being consistent, and it doesn't represent, in our view, a departure from our historical position.
Brother Rohit?
I'm glad you played that image of Walter. The three of us, we were there with Walter. We share 43 years of history together. And we have stuck together. We may have differed in terms of tactics, but the strategy has remained the same: how to unite the races of Guyana towards a common goal. And as Brother Ogun has said, 1992 tore us apart in terms of the support. Once we were fighting against a dictatorship, there was unity. Once the PPP got the victory, that unity was torn apart from that moment on. And the PPP, they left us in the cold. They walked away. They had a great opportunity to at least initiate a multiracial struggle, but they didn't. And we saw 23 years of betrayal in terms of working towards a multiracial Guyana. That paved the way for the APNU AFC government to come into place. That was a remarkable breakthrough. We had 28 years to recover from and 23 years to recover from, and that was the conditions that brought about that remarkable struggle. Again, from my perspective, we were betrayed again. And you, Dr. Hines, you have the history of it. You supported that government and they cut you out from the Chronicle. They silenced you. Brother Ogunseye also knows that as partner in that government, we were muzzled. We did not want to be seen as bringing down a government because it needed a chance. It needed to prove itself. And I think the record shows that we did not live up to the expectations.
Are you struck by how Walter's analysis in 1977 fits exactly what is happening today in Guyana? Are you surprised at that?
There's no surprise there. Absolutely no surprise there. But we had to wait. We had to wait until the masses had arrived at that position. Now, what has dramatically changed the situation is oil. And it gives us the opportunity to leave that legacy of bitterness behind and fight for a Guyana that Walter envisaged, and we still have to put it into reality. And we have a brilliant moment to do so.
We have a brilliant moment to do so. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue this discussion with members of the WPA.
Where it is going, how it will extricate itself from certain relationships, and indeed one wonders whether fundamentally the petty bourgeois class really has a commitment to extricate itself from international ties.
Food plenty in the market to till GMC dumping. Money not ever buy because you're poor like me, you're black like me, and poverty is your legacy. Last election was 64. Since then was selection. That's all about corruption. Poor like me, you're black like me, and poverty is your legacy. Yet we have democracy and can't do nothing. We have neither the power nor capacity. Code of Conduct Act start cut down corruption tree. Liverpool, Brabant, libel scandal. They clean in court, mirror in court, you see in jail. Can't get so big. So, Fully man, Buck man, Black man, Chinese man, bury the act,
renounce starvation, denounce corruption, announce revolution. Cause you're poor like me, you're black like me, and poverty is your legacy.
Well, that was the late Michael June. And the year was 1976. The place was County High School. It was our emancipation celebrations. And Brother Michael did that poem, Black like me, you poor like me, and poverty is your legacy. Again, 1976, we are in what? 2023. How long ago that was? 47 years ago. Everything he said there could fit what is happening today. History sometimes is a great teacher. The leaders have changed. And the ones who used to lick down the ones in the 70s, exactly the same thing. Who would have thought we would have been repeating those words in 2023? You're poor like me, you're black like me, and poverty is your legacy. Brothers, what's the WPA's take on the bill that is being laid before Parliament to introduce the National Intelligence Unit? We understand that this unit has been in place, but now they're seeking to make it law. And some of the things that they have put in the bill are quite frightening. Brother Ogunseye, I'll start with you.
Well, the WPA is opposed to it. We are convinced that when we look at the timing of it, and when we look at the way the bill has been constructed, and when we look at the bill where the head of the agency will be responsible directly to the president, not to Parliament, and when we look and we see that that head of that agency will be given all the rights and privilege and powers that the head of the army and the police, has, it is very worrying for us. And as a political party who is struggling on the ground, we are convinced that in some way it is the WPA activities on the ground that have influenced the timing of this bill. And we find it hard to separate the engagement on the political engagement on the ground, from the government decision to have this agency and to try to rush it through with the kind of speed there seems to be prepared to rush it through. We are glad that they have agreed to send it to the select committee. I think that's the committee they call it in Parliament, where there will be some discussions on it. But we are totally opposed to it because we feel such a bill, should not come at this historical moment where we are engaged in a degree of political contestation with a lot of unresolved issues, and we're in the middle of a local government elections and all the associated problems. And a bill like that, in the WPA view, requires, support across parties. And one of the important factors in achieving that support across parties and support among the masses of the people is to have the bill introduced at a time when there is the kind of political environment that will allow objective discourse on the intent of the bill, examination of the powers that the agency and its officials will have, and to see to what extent it correspond and it doesn't violate the constitution. Okay, to me, for us in the WPA, all of those are important matters, and the way in which the government is approaching the matter, we are totally opposed, and we find it hard to support the process.
Brother Rohit?
In Guyana, anything and everything will be seen in polarized terms. As they say, fire is a good servant, but a bad master. So it's in whose hands, who wields it, decides what it will be. And if we look carefully at the political situation in Guyana, if we look at what's happening in GCOM, if we look at the last elections, anything this government does will be suspect. It will always be seen as in the pursuit of power, naked power. Even if they do it with the best of interests, it will be interpreted as the worst possible thing they can do. And this is a dilemma of Guyana. Look at what is going on. When you're in government, anything you do, the opposition will deem as a threat. And when you are in power, you turn around doing the same things. So it's the polarization of Guyana that determines how everything will be viewed. It is said that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And it is also said, those who shout, Lord, you can quote the scriptures for your own purposes. You have two things there to juxtapose. And that's the dilemma we're faced with.
That's the dilemma that we're faced with. We are going to take a break, and then when we come back, we're going to continue this conversation with members of the WPA on tonight's edition of Politics 101, WPA Groundings.
Walking through the crowd, your vibe is high, steady at your post, time to open your eyes. Awake, 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 awake. Wake your brothers, wake your sisters, glorify yourselves. Onward, freedom fighters, one more time. I say, hey, we are forwarding this time. We are forwarding right now. We are forwarding this time. We are forwarding right now. To win our freedom, our God-given rights. Hey, liberation time come. Liberation time come.
We are marching today to stop ISAF. We are marching today for better wages. We are marching today for our children. We are marching today for our safety. We are marching because marching is one of the ways in which we can show that we are not in favor of what is going on. So we are calling on you to join this march. The march began at Boston this morning with a short meeting. And there will be other ways to stop meetings along the way. At Mon Report, at Success, at Better Hope, and at Pleasant. And this afternoon, we will end with a rally at the Kitty Market Square.
A little piece of history there. That was in 1987, a march from Buxton to Kitty. I play this tonight so that you can see that we were not always the way we are. that at some point we stood up. We stood up. And the WPA was at the forefront of that march. Started in Buxton. That little introduction you heard there was a fellow named David Hines. 36 years ago, the voice was a little bit immature then. Didn't have a big man voice then, I suppose. But I played that clip to say that we once stood up, and that in any society, when terror is being rained down on you and you don't stand up, you're killing yourself more than the oppressor is killing you. That march from Buxton to Kitty on a Saturday, there were children, 8, 9, 10 years old, in that march, marching with us from Buxton. And so today we are calling for boots on the ground. That was boots on the ground. And I want to say that we know something about boots on the ground. Tacuma Ogunseye, you remember that march?
Yes, I do. I do. We all was much younger. We know all aging. Yeah.
Yes, brother Rohit, what is so different today than back then? I mean, back then the government in place, they say, was a harsh government, but people came out and fought back. You know, now we are hearing how difficult it is to mobilize people. What a strange.
When you label a dictatorship, then you have to generate the will to struggle against it. It's a bigger danger when a democracy gives cover to a dictatorship to do whatever it will in the name of democracy, tries to muzzle voices and label the voices. And I am looking at one of the persons who has been labeled basically a terrorist. That is the danger when a dictatorship has a mandate of democracy to its name. That is what puts the struggle on a totally different footing. This is what makes that bill you just referred to even more insidious. That when you can put a mandate of democracy on a dictatorship, we are in a dangerous situation.
We are indeed in a very dangerous situation. What does the WPA make of the recent arrest of a public servant in the United States of America, and then all kinds of explanations and non-explanations you've been hearing? For the WPA, what is the big story that came out of that incident, Tacuma?
I think first and foremost, the WPA feels it's really a slap in the face to the nation, because at the end of the day, she represents the government of Guyana. By extension, she represents all of us as Guyanese. And to have a government official being fingered in the way in which she has been fingered by the United States raise a lot of questions that require some very clear answers. And we are not satisfied that the government and the young lady is coming clean and clear. And that we can't say we're disappointed, because we, in a way, we don't expect them to publicly, acknowledge their wrongdoings if there has been wrongdoings. And clearly, from all indications, there seems to be have been wrongdoings, but one have to separate, partisan interests from national interests and try as much as we understand the interplay between these persons and the party that they belong to, the government that they represent. At the end of the day, there's something named Guyana and the Guyana state. Both Guyana is a country and a state. And state institutions and state actors, we have to insist that their conduct and their accountability is to us, the people of the country, and to insist, as difficult as it may be, we have to press for some standards that are consistent with the national interest. And in this case, we believe as WPA, we have to pursue this matter, as long as it's take, to make sure we get clarity on the matter. There is a lot of allegations, okay? And the United States, for their part, have been indicating, but they haven't really spelled out in significant details, okay, the whole story. So there are some questionable areas, and as a country, we need explanation and clarity, and we have to press both the government and the United States to provide that clarity.
Brother Rohit?
I can only concur with Brother Ogunseye here, that the state, by definition, represents a nation, and it has to be accountable to its citizens. When something happens that damages the integrity of the state, then its citizens want to know what is taking place. That is the definition of good governance. We are left here to speculate endlessly. And when the facts are not forthcoming, then it becomes a partisan issue.
When the facts are not forthcoming, it becomes a partisan issue. Our position in the WP has always been that you don't win anything without a fight, without a fight, without
He wants to fight you to come into the man. Join us for the love to the people. Join the people. Along a walk. Yeah. In the road to Eastern. Where we come from. Where we come from. Where we come from. Where we don't know. Where we don't know. Where we don't know.
I want to tell you that some of the marchers were a very tender age, children of 8, 9, 10, and 12. Give them a special hand. At the other end of the pole, there were people like me, over 60, some a little more feeble than I, but brave at heart. And in the middle are the salt of the earth, those in their prime, who are custodians of all the energy of the revolution, which we have to fight for our freedom and well-being. Our program this afternoon is simple. The Patriotic Coalition called this march to get the people to take part in a fight to better our own conditions, the conditions of the people, to better these conditions in various ways. The coalition was formed because of the denial of the right to vote. And the right to vote does not mean going into a ballot place and scratching a paper. It also means the right to have those votes honestly counted. Today is the anniversary of Sharpeville, the day when they shot down scores of people in South Africa at the place of that name, representing an extreme form of denial of human rights. There the struggle took a very bloody form of repression. It is not because our struggle here is not very bloody, except for a few selective assassinations and work of bandits. It is not because of that that we also do not suffer denials.
The voice there of Yusi Kwayana, again, listening to the words of Brother Yusi is as if he's talking today. Sisters and brothers, you know, sometimes, as I said before, history is a great teacher. It's good to go back to these things because there are people today in government. First of all, they weren't out there marching and struggling. They were hiding most of the time. But they were hollering, and today they're in government doing the same thing. It is why a revolutionary party is always important in a society, to remind the society what others want that society to forget. We can have boots on the ground. As you see there, those children, 8, 9, and 10, marching from Buxton, their parents gave permission for them to march from Buxton. Today, we are playing around. We are playing around. We are not mobilizing our people in the same way. We are giving in to fear. Those little children were not fearful. And I want to say one last thing. Things were bad in those days. but we marched. And they want agent provocateurs in the march to beat up Indians. Indians were in the march. A lot has changed from those days. Understand, my brothers and sisters, what we are up against. And there is no answer than to confront a dictatorship. We did it then, and we have every moral right, every political right to do it again this time. Brother Ogunseye, as you watch those tapes and the messages then and the comparison to today, do you all in the WPA feel vindicated?
Of course. In fact, I'm heartened that you were able to uncover them, and watching at them, it revigorates me personally, and it demonstrates the correctness of the WPA then and now. And I think that it is timely because we're faced with people making all kinds of wild accusations about WPA in terms of race and being racial. And when you watch those tapes, you see WPA be mobilizing African faces against an African dictatorship, okay, and in solidarity with Indians. I think it answers our critics, and I think that when I look and I try to understand the change that took place in the country since then, I don't know. We have to factor in changes in the global space and the political space, and how that impact the internal politics of the country. But I think that after the death of Dr. Jagan, it started when Dr. Jagan was there, when the PPP fell victim to those who argue that the state and the government should deal with crimes in the society, okay, in a certain way. And we came out of a situation where the state, even under the PNC control, okay, were using the police to engage in extrajudicial killings of African lumpen. But because it was an African state, African police, violating the constitution and the law and killing African youths, as much as it was a political problem, it didn't become a racial problem. But when the PPP came to power in '92, and they began to practice the same thing, and then quickly, when we saw the embrace of the drug cartels, and we begin to see the situation worsening, where the drug cartels paying the police to engage in executions. So you get the executions that were coming out of the natural contradiction between African police engaging with African youths. But then you get the drug interests, okay, putting pressure on the police, okay, to act in a certain way. And we saw a worsening of that situation. And there has been from that point in my judgment, and I think it is true in the WPA judgment, that the politics in the country had reached a level of violence unprecedented in the history of the country, where we know state actors were engaged in executions along with drug lords, killing people in numbers unprecedented, and we saw the reaction, the counter-reaction. I think that have drove, okay, out of Guinea's politics, the willingness for people to engage without a serious reflection on the price you will have to pay. And I think one of the remarkable things of the Jagdeo's presidency, and he's probably the longest serving president. His politics has been to push the opposition in a position where if you want to achieve anything, okay, whether it's increased wages, whether it's access to government media, whatever, okay, the traditional ways of achieving that, he makes sure it don't work and force you in a position that you have to do more than was traditionally necessary. So you place a higher price on political activities and protests. If you're going to protest, you're going to use the police to shoot you with pellets and so forth and so forth. So you, the opposition, has to decide whether you're going to respond to the government appropriately. And it is true that tactics, for the greater part, succeed in paralyzing the political opposition, where we always seem to be dropping short of what is necessary, and we create, okay, in the body politics that the PPP regime and the Jagdeos and so are vicious, they're unbeatable, and we weak because we didn't respond the way we ought to respond as a political opposition. If, for example, to deal with the extrajudicial killings, the WPA decided to mend fence with the PNC in order for us to have a collective, okay, approach to that and to push back against the PPP. That was an important political response. But we fail to move to the next stage, and we allow the victims of extrajudicial killings, okay, to pick up the weapons and begin to fight back. And then we, given our political culture and the class nature of the society, we couldn't embrace that. And the state deemed it as criminal behavior. And there's little discussion on the social and the political aspect of the problem. And we saw what happened. And we saw how many killings and counter killings that unprecedented. So politics and violence became unprecedented in the country. And I think we still live in the consequences of that, and fear of political action is a reality in the consciousness of the people. And to the extent that the government is behaving the way it is behaving, and the opposition can't counter that with appropriate response, I think our supporters, instinctively is reading that we are ready yet.
We are not ready yet, but we know that once you engage in the kind of mobilization, you will get ready. Yes, Brother Jerry, that was Brother Ivan in the days when you didn't have to pay drummers. Drummers, when you were marching, the drummers would come out and march with you. And all the Buxtonians in the audience, you're recognizing some. Yes, Miss Booker, you said you got away. You get away and come on the march. That was 36 years ago. Those 8-year-olds would be 44 now and 46. And they were part of that history. We didn't have to bust them in. We had to bust them back when the march was finished. And I remember being in charge of the operation to get those children back to Buxton. We had the buses and they were all ready. Nobody went missing. And it was not only Dr. King who used, as they say, who put the young people in the front line to struggle. We also had it in Guyana, where the young children were part of the struggle. And that is the kind of Guyana that we want to leave as a legacy, that our young people are engaged, even when they're children. Brother Rohit, Kanhai, as you look at those images.
I think Brother Ogun is making some very important observations. We have to look at the struggle during when Guyana nationalized everything. The state was responsible for the violence. Its authority was stamped on the violence. You saw it, it was visible. But the privatization and deregulation movement is very important to understand what happened subsequently. That was when the state began to dismantle the state organizations. And when the PPP came into power, it resorted to private armies, drug money, and everything to maintain that very state violence. So that was the shift. Now, there was a severe economic crisis. We seem to have forgotten the whole barrel industry. The TV industry was built on the barrel industry. We call it survival kits. Now, I will tell you a very specific case where somebody went to buy 4 tires and came home with 2. The reason why, from 5 to 1 to 125 to 1. That was the drama of the Guyana currency. Just process that. You leave your home to go and buy 4 tires, and you came home with 2. That happened overnight. So the disintegration of the society is mirrored in the privatization and deregulation movement. And the state violence that was prior in the age of nationalization became privatized. Drug money. The drug lords are paying government salary, but the government was getting in return the violence to support it. Now, what has dramatically changed is the oil money. Now, what we're seeing is the government is using oil money to buy the army. They said it. They are paying the army huge salaries, everything. They're incorporating more army people into the state because you don't need the drug lords anymore. You don't need that source of funding. So the state now will resort back to the state organization to carry out the repression. I hope I'm making some sense.
Yes, you are making sense. And our own Dr. Clive Thomas dubbed that scenario that you explained there just now, the criminalization of the state, where the state merged with underworld elements. Thank you. So many comments we are getting here tonight on the images that we are seeing. Some people are recognizing themselves. They're recognizing others that they saw. And like I said, I played those images not to relitigate the past, but to really bring ourselves into the future and to see that today is probably worse than it was then. And back then, it was bad. But people mustered the courage to stand up and fight. If these images of little children, as they did in Soweto, as they did against Bull Connors, if little children could have come out and marched from Buxton to Kitty in 1987, what about those who are older? Those who are older. Freedom comes not without a struggle. In order to win something, you have to fight for something. I want to thank Brother Ogunseye and Brother Rohit Kanhai of the WPA for coming on tonight and engaging these issues. From the comments, of course, people are in tune with the analysis. And so I want to thank you all for coming, and I will see you all again next Monday. Tomorrow night, we are going to have GHK Lal is going to be here tomorrow night, and he's going to pick up the baton. I want, as usual, to thank you all for coming out, and for those of you who have expressed support and confidence for the WPA. We thank you, and we hope that we can play our role, however comparatively small that role may be, because of the resources. The fire has not left some of us. We may be older now, but that spirit is still there. Until tomorrow night, I want to thank you all so much again, and to say, as usual, I love you.